The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is April 13th, 2025, and we are once again going to talk about the situation within Ukraine. So let's start. First of all, we are going to talk about the Zaporozhye direction, or Zaporozhye, if you want to say that in Russian. It appears that the Russians have basically restored everything back to the way it was before, literally, summer 2023. Like, this area here has now all but been reversed. Like, compare a video from now, like today's video, to like one of the very first videos on this channel when I covered the Ukrainian counteroffensive in this area. Literally, it was just like this. I swear to God, it was just like this, and the Russians have now reversed it. But otherwise, not much news going on here. Next up, we're going to talk about the Velika Novosilka direction, or the former Velika Novosilka direction. The Russians have continued their advances north of the town and have also began to push a little further to the west towards the border with Dnipropetrovsk region. They are contesting, I think, right now for the village of Vilne Pule and are on the brink of entering the village of Shevchenko, which apparently is home to a rare mineral here known as lithium, I think. And after Shevchenko, it's Dnipropetrovsk region. And to be more specific, Malivka, which would be the first village here in Dnipro region. But yeah, Russians are advancing there. Not much going on, at least in the former Kharkove/Andriivka direction. But apparently there are reports that the Russians have indeed not only consolidated their gains near the village of Rozliv, but have begun a push towards the village of Bagatyr. And should this village here fall, then yeah, that's basically it for the Ukrainians in the southern Donetsk direction, because Kolmar will easily fall. And again, this will bust open a pathway towards the Dnipro region. And going a little up north again, the Russians have advanced east of the border with Dnipro region. They are right now contesting and have almost completely taken the village of Bogdanivka. And there are reports speculating that Troitsky has been captured by the Russian forces, but Syriac has not confirmed that yet. But we'll take it with a grain of salt for now. But if this village here is gone, then the Russians only have 2 square kilometers left towards they enter Dnipropetrovsk region. And then they are advancing in the fields here that are south of Kotlarivka. And there is a report right now from Deep State that most, if not all, of Preobrazhenka has fallen to Russian control too. And the Deep State UA map has also confirmed that the Russians are advancing outside of the village of Nadivka too. And then going once again further north near the Dnipro border, nothing much has changed, at least in the direction of Uspinovka. But the fact that Deep State has not confirmed or denied what's going on in this village is very telling. And also, some mappers got it wrong, and it appears that Udachny is now being contested again. The Russians have re-entered the settlement of Udachny, and it's sort of resembling what the original assault into the town looked like. But yeah, the Russians are back in the settlement now, and it appears that despite the fact that Kotline is basically split in half, and the fact that Ukrainians claim that they control good chunks of it, it appears that the Russians are already counterattacking in this area, and it doesn't look good for the armed forces of Ukraine at this moment. And also to repeat, like from the last video or so, it appears that the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Pokrovsk direction has failed, and now the Russians are capitalizing on this by going on the offensive. This, of course, includes the town, or no, not town, but village of Lisovka here, which is now under majority Russian control, or in the gray zone here. And then you got the village of Suky Yar, which is still a gray zone or like no man's land or what, because Ukrainians do not want the Russians to get anywhere closer to the cities of Myonograd and Pokrovsk. Like, if the Russians at least got here, then literally both cities would be within artillery fire range. Well, a lot more accurately, that is, because they are already in artillery fighting range and also within a healthy distance for FPV drones and like fiber optic drones too. So it's all too easy for the Russians at this point when it comes to like using their drones on both cities. But time will tell if the Russians will continue to push north, or like towards Pokrovsk itself, or they go towards the Dnipropetrovsk region. But yeah, I'm gonna bet on the latter because I don't think they're gonna be able to take Pokrovsk until they cut off the E50 road. And also, speaking of Pokrovsk, it appears that some interesting things have happened as of late in this direction here, which is sort of nicknamed the Toretsk direction, but I don't know if it's really necessarily the Toretsk direction anymore. The way I see it, this is now the Konstantinovka direction. And what I'm referring to, by the way, is this city here, Konstantinovka, but if the Russians take it over, it's then going to be called Konstantinovka. So, what is going on here? Apparently, the Russians have taken the village of Kalinove, which for some reason they decided not to advance on for a long time, and they cleared the outskirts of Alexandropol, Pentolymonivka. Sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly or said it incorrectly entirely. I probably butchered it. And they also cleared out Velin Tanivka too. And they are about to battle for the village of Suka Bolka. And once they're able to do this, this pocket here is gone. It will be wiped out. And with the taking of Kalinove and also with the advance on Tarasivka, the Russians are probably going to try to push towards the north here, towards Konstantinovka. And I think their goal is at least to reach the village of Barostok before, of course, they bombard Konstantinovka with all sorts of weaponry, like drones and artillery shells. And in the city of Toretsk itself, the Russians have all but regained the initiative, and while it is not 100% confirmed yet, the Russians have basically retaken control of the city and have now cleared out most of the Terrakon's landfill areas, which have been a pain in the ass for Russia since they tried to take over the city. But now that they are taking most, if not all, of the Terrakons, it is very likely that a Russian control of all of Toretsk will probably be as likely as soon as May 2024. I mean, not 24, but May 25. My mistake. But yeah, all they need is this Terrakon here, and it's all over. This neighborhood here is probably no man's land, and I doubt there's any like actual armed forces of Ukraine men there left. The Russians have also reportedly started advancing north of the village of Druzhba, but that's about it. And in the town of Chasiv Yar, the Ukrainians are trying to counterattack by attacking the southern positions here. But in the town center itself, the Russians have finally taken up some commie blocks. And while a lot of this is like now largely in ruins, sort of like Volchansk, the Russians are advancing in the town of Chasiv Yar, and it seems as if the armed forces of Ukraine are caught in what Dima military summary calls a cauldron. So they are partially encircled here. And the only way out, of course, is through here, through like these unreliable dirt roads. I mean, yeah, it looks like they're encircled here, and the only way out for them is really for them to go through these forested areas here. Like, they cannot really use their vehicles too well, so yeah, it's a hard thing. But the roads, like, coming out of Chasiv Yar itself have all but been cut off. Like, they're literally pretty much encircled. Because, so let's say they're here, okay? And there's this street, okay? And then this little pond is here. Now, this path is cut off. This path here is cut off. And, it's also cut off. Yeah, there's no way out for their vehicles, like if they tried to get anything in there. So now it's literally just infantry on infantry fighting. Like, they gotta run or walk in order to get into the center of Chasiv Yar itself. But yeah, it appears the Russians are probably going to take this town by late spring or early summer. It's been a very rough roller coaster ride for the Russians here in Chasiv, but the battle is in the twilight phase without literally a doubt. It's almost over. It will be finished a lot sooner than all of you think. Now, there's also reports that the Russians have begun advancing again in the direction of Siversk, which, by the way, in the northern direction of the village of Verkhnokam-Yansky. Now, pardon me if I got that wrong again, but these names are not the most easiest thing for an American like me to pronounce, so I apologize for that. But yeah, they are advancing in the westward direction towards Siversk, though I don't really take this too seriously, at least yet, because I think in order for Siversk to fall, the Russians have to recapture Liman in order to make that happen. And speaking of which, let's actually go to that front right now. The Russians have all but cleared out the outskirts of Yampolovka and have advanced and entered the village of Torske. And if the Russians are able to take Torske, then Zarychine is cooked, and then all that remains between them and Liman are these fields here, which are probably heavily defended by the armed forces of Ukraine. And if Liman were to fall to Russia, then we'll see a round 2 for Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. But I don't know if the Russians are necessarily going to do that yet, but we'll see. The Russians have also taken control over the village of Kadornivka, and have also retaken the village of Nadia right here, which means that there is only one or 2 major settlements left in the Lugansk Oblast that are still under the control of the Ukrainians. So around 99.8% control of Lugansk region is under the control of Russia. And once these 2 villages here fall, that is all she wrote for Lugansk region, and the Russians will then enter the Kharkiv region here, once again. But yeah, nothing much, though, going on in the southern Kupiansk direction. In the central Kupiansk direction, the Russians have reportedly made some gains and recaptured positions that they once had earlier this year in the village of Kolesnikivka. And then going a little further north, apparently Russians are making some advances outside of the village of Stepova Novoselivka. But other than that, though, there are no assaults on the village at this time. It looks pretty stagnant up here for the most part, except the village of Kamyenka is now contested between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And once this falls, this whole bridgehead here will all but be connected by the Russians, and it will allow them to do further offensive operations into the Kharkiv region. Volchansk, nothing much going on here other than maybe some Russian advances here and there. The Russians are slowly but surely taking the initiative in the northern neighborhoods of Volchansk, even though there's pretty much nothing there left. Nothing going on in the Lipsy direction, so we can skip that. And then last but not least, we come to the Kursk/Sumy direction. The Russians have reportedly retaken control over the village of Gogolivka and are on the brink of retaking the village of Ulishna as well. And the Russians have also cleared out the outskirts of Guivo and are about to enter one of the last villages in Kursk region that is still under AFU control, which is the village of Gornau. And once Gornau is taken, then the Russians can enter the Kursk region towards the large settlement of Myropolia. And going a little further, let's actually go into the Sumy region proper. The Russians have completed their complete control over the village of Basovka, and it is now confirmed that they also control the village of Zarovka as well. And the Russians are also now contesting for the village of Lakhnia, and apparently they have been able to take over half of the village already, with the southern part still being the next target, and then after that, then you got the small town of Yankovka. And once Yankovka falls, then the Russians all but have a steady, solid, like pavement, or footprint into the Sumy region. And then the last thing I want to report is that there was a massive attack on the city of Sumi itself, like in the city center, and apparently a lot of people were killed in this strike. It was apparently an Iskander missile that was raining on a military reward ceremony, and then the Russians struck it, and it killed a lot of people in the process. Both military and civilians were killed in the process, unfortunately. If you ask me what I think of these attacks, well, obviously it's a war crime, but it is a direct message from Russia themselves. We are coming. We are back. You cannot get rid of us. We are literally coming back to Sumi. It's inevitable. Get ready. Like, they're literally sending them a very scary message with this strike today in Sumi. They're literally telling them, as I said, that we're back. You cannot get rid of us. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but you get the point. They're definitely sending a message that they hope will demoralize the armed forces of Ukraine and the citizens within Sumi itself, maybe just to get them to surrender to the Russians without a fight. But I doubt that. I think they're going to put up a fight for the Sumi region like they did last time in 2022. I mean, why would they not resist, right? They're very prideful people, and they're not going to give up without a fight. Now, one last thing before I get going. I've heard reports that the Russians are going to attack the Chernigov region. I don't know how true this is, but if this were to be the case, that would be complete insanity, because the Chernigov region is a logistical nightmare for the Russian armed forces, and for that alone, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Sumi is much better when conducting offensive operations, and I also think it would be very risky to do an attack on the Chernigov region too, because it would be overstretching things for the Russians, and it would probably give the Ukrainians maybe an excuse to invade Bryansk region. And as a bonus, by the way, apparently General Keith Kellogg proposed sort of a partition of Ukraine in a way. Like, Russia gets to keep what they were able to get during the conflict itself, and they would establish like a demilitarized zone or something along these lines, which obviously pissed off the Russians, but the Ukrainians were pissed off too by this proposal by Kellogg, because apparently the Ukrainians will be left to fend for themselves in the eastern part of Ukraine, like everything here, from Chernigov all the way to the Kharkiv region, and there's literally nothing they can do. Like, the West won't come to save them. British and French troops, as Kellogg apparently proposed, would come to the western part of Ukraine. And so if you ask me, if the Ukrainians are left to fend for themselves here without any Western troops here, like in the western part, then left bank Ukraine might as well already be surrendered to Russia without a fight. Because we all know that the armed forces of Ukraine, without Western support, is really worth anything. They're cooked. Well done. Like, they're going to get absolutely steamrolled in this case. Now, one last thing before I go. I want to mention that my upload schedule has been modified due to the fact that not a lot of movements have been happening on the front as of late, but I promise that as soon as we get to May or so, I will return to my weekly upload schedule, and then, So, but you also have to, we also have to, like, wait and see what happens on the front in order for the weekly upload schedule to return, that is. It was really bad during the Rasputitsa time, and I'm sure it's going to get better, though, once we get to the fighting season, which should start in May, even though some people would argue that it's already starting now. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. So I hope all of you enjoyed today's video, found it entertaining, informative, and I'll see you all next time, folks, in 2 weeks. So peace out, and goodbye.